Welcome to The Widow Who Danced Alone, a Hercule Poirot mystery. Have you ever seen someone dance alone so gracefully, so hauntingly that it felt as if they were moving with a ghost? Tonight, in the glittering halls of Charnwood House, beneath chandeliers and whispered secrets, a widow dressed in silver begins her final waltz. By dawn, a man will be dead, and every smile in the ballroom will hide a lie. Hercule Poirot, with his little grey cells and piercing calm, steps into a world of shadows, obsession, and deceit, where love turns cruel and ghosts wear human faces. Are you listening in the dark? Tell us where you're joining from. And remember, once the dance begins, there is no turning back. The rain fell in thin, silvery lines over the lawns of Charnwood House, blurring the lanterns that glimmered through the mist. It was one of those nights when the air felt both festive and uneasy, when laughter seemed to echo too sharply, and the chandeliers burned a little too brightly, as if defying some unseen shadow beyond the windows. Inside, the great ballroom was alive with music. The string quartet played a waltz, and ladies in soft gowns moved like petals caught in a breeze. Among them, Mrs. Helena Blythe, the widow of the late industrialist. Sir Arthur Blythe was the evening's most striking figure. Tall, slender, and pale as porcelain, she moved with the grace of someone used to being watched. Her eyes, however, carried a strange light, half sorrow, half defiance. She had been seen dancing alone long after the guests had paired, turning slowly, her hand lifted as though an invisible partner guided her through the steps. "Morbid, if you ask me," muttered Colonel Hastings, though whether he spoke to himself or to the little Belgian beside him was unclear. Hercule Poirot, immaculate in black tie and with a boutonniere of white carnation, inclined his head. "Non, mon ami. There is something most curious about a woman who dances without company. It tells the truth of her heart if one knows how to listen." Hastings frowned. "Truth of her heart? Nonsense! She's grieving. That's all." "Grief, yes," said Poirot softly, "but also guilt, perhaps, or fear." Before Hastings could inquire further, a sudden commotion rippled through the hall. A footman stumbled forward, white-faced, stammering something about the West Gallery. Within minutes, the music faltered, the laughter ceased, and the guests surged like a tide toward the grand staircase. On the marble floor of the West Gallery lay the body of Miss Lionel Carthorpe, Helena Blythe's solicitor and her late husband's executor. His head was turned at an unnatural angle, eyes staring wide, mouth frozen in surprise. Near his hand was a broken champagne glass and a single white glove, a woman's glove. Helena Blythe stood a few steps away, motionless. Her gloved hand, the other one, trembled faintly at her side. "I didn't," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I swear I didn't." Hastings would later recall that Poirot did not rush forward like the others. Instead, he simply adjusted the crease of his cuff and observed the scene with extraordinary stillness, his sharp grey eyes flicking between the body, the glove, and the woman who danced alone. "The evening," said Poirot quietly, "has taken its first step in a darker dance." The ballroom had fallen into a dreadful hush. The laughter, the clinking of glasses, the rustle of gowns, all were swallowed by the terrible stillness surrounding Lionel Carthorpe's body. Somewhere, a clock struck 11, its hollow chime echoing through the corridor like a toll for the dead. Helena Blythe stood at the edge of the growing crowd, her pale face luminous in the golden light, her eyes fixed on something only she could see. Poirot's gaze never left her. "Madame," he said softly, stepping forward with the madame, unhurried precision of a man approaching a painting rather than a corpse. "You will forgive me, perhaps, if I disturb your thoughts. But tell me, when did you last speak to Monsieur Carthorpe?" Her lips trembled. "Half an hour ago, perhaps less. He wished to discuss something private." Her voice faltered on the last word, like a violin string drawn too tight. "Private, yes," murmured Poirot. "And yet at a ball? Curious." Ne sais pas. The waltz, the champagne, the glitter, and amidst it all affairs of death and inheritance. Hastings frowned. Surely you don't suspect her already, Poirot? My dear Hastings, said Poirot, tilting his head slightly. I suspect everyone. It is my profession. The police were soon summoned, led by Inspector Hewitt, a stout man with a red face and a distrust of foreigners with sharp eyes. Accident, perhaps, he muttered, kneeling beside the body. Slipped on the marble, struck his head. There's a sign of a struggle. Poirot raised an eyebrow. Indeed? And yet, mon cher inspecteur, the glass is broken, but there is no champagne spilled. The glove lies near the hand of the dead man, but the lady's pair observe she wears only one. You see? The symmetry. It is broken. Hewitt grunted, unimpressed. I'll take statements, if you don't mind. But Poirot had already moved on. He observed the guests with the quiet scrutiny of a watchmaker examining the gears of a delicate mechanism. Each face told a fragment of truth, each glance a hidden fear. There was Captain Allerton, Helena's late husband's business partner, too eager to explain where he had been. There was Miss Cecily Vane, the secretary, whose eyes were red-rimmed but not from grief. And there, by the mantelpiece, Lord Martin, whose calm expression trembled only when Poirot's gaze met his. Hastings, ever loyal but bewildered, leaned close. Do you think one of them did it? Poirot smiled faintly. Mon ami, the world does not divide so easily. It is not who did it, but why it had to be done tonight, at this ball, beneath the gaze of all. Helena swayed suddenly, and Hastings darted forward to catch her arm. She's fainting, poor woman. But Poirot's eyes narrowed. Non, Hastings. She does not faint. She remembers. That is very different. Moments later, she was escorted to a sitting room, where a fire burned low. Poirot followed quietly. The widow sat before the flames, her gloved hand clenched tightly on her lap. He accused me, she whispered suddenly. Said I was deceiving him, that I knew more than I pretended. And were you, madame? Poirot asked gently. Her head snapped up. No, I only wanted peace. Since Arthur's death, I've wanted nothing else. Poirot's tone softened. And yet peace eludes those who dance alone, does it not? For the briefest instant, her eyes flashed with something sharp anger, or fear, or both. Then she turned away. You wouldn't understand, Monsieur Poirot. Some ghosts refuse to leave the room, even when the door is open. He inclined his head. Ah, but madame. I understand ghosts very well. They wear fine clothes and smile at parties. They speak politely, and sometimes they kill. Outside, the murmur of voices grew louder as the inspector began taking statements. Poirot rejoined Hastings in the hallway, where portraits of long-dead Blythers watched from gilded frames. Well? Asked Hastings. What do you make of it? Poirot's gaze drifted toward the darkened gallery, where the body had been covered with a sheet. I make of it a pattern, unfinished, incomplete. A glove without its twin, a glass without a spill, a dance without a partner. The symmetry offends me, Hastings, and when symmetry offends, it is always because truth has been misplaced. You think it's murder? Poirot adjusted his cufflink, a faint smile curving his lips. Mon ami, everything about tonight is too careful to be chance. The setting, the witness, the symbol, even the manner of the death it whispers of intent. No. Someone has played a very elegant move upon the board. He looked once more toward the sitting room where Helena Blythe sat motionless before the fire. The widow who danced alone, he murmured, may not have danced alone after all. And somewhere deep in Charnwood House, beneath the hum of nervous whispers, a floorboard creaked softly as though an unseen listener was moving through the dark. The night dragged on like a fevered dream, each hour slower and more suffocating than the last. Charnwood House, once glowing with laughter and light, now seemed wrapped in a shroud. Guests murmured in corners, their voices brittle with speculation, while the servants moved like pale ghosts through the corridors, carrying trays that no one touched. Outside, the rain had ceased, but the wind pressed against the windows with a hollow moan, as if it too sought entry into the mystery within. Poirot and Hastings remained in the West Gallery after the police had cleared it. The body had been removed, but the scent of champagne lingered, a strange sweetness, mingled with the faint metallic tang of death. Poirot moved with precise care, eyes tracing invisible lines along the marble floor, pausing where the glove had been found. His reflection flickered in the polished stone, a dark silhouette beside the faint smear of a shoe print. "It is a curious footprint, Hastings. Too small for a man, too pointed for the lady's own shoe." Hastings bent to look. "A servant's, perhaps." "None. The servants wear soft soles, designed not to be heard. This heel, listen, clicks upon the marble. It was someone who wished to be noticed, but not remembered." Hastings frowned. "Poirot, I can't see the difference." "That," said Poirot mildly, "is precisely why you make an excellent audience and I an excellent detective." His gaze drifted toward the grand staircase. "It is not enough to observe, mon ami. One must understand what one observes. Monsieur Carthorpe did not die by misfortune. He died because he knew something, and tonight he chose to speak it." From the far corridor came the faint sound of footsteps. Poirot straightened as Miss Cecily Vane approached, clutching a shawl about her shoulders. Her eyes darted nervously. "Monsieur Poirot, I didn't mean to intrude. I just thought, perhaps if you needed to ask more questions." Poirot's tone softened at once. "But of course, mademoiselle. You were close to the deceased?" "I worked for him," she said, voice trembling. "He was kind, mostly. But lately, he'd been different, suspicious. He kept papers locked away, documents about the Blythe estate. He said there were inconsistencies in Lady Blythe's accounts, but he never told me what." "Did you see these documents?" She shook her head quickly. "No, only the envelope. It had her name written on it in his hand. He always carried it with him." "Curious," murmured Poirot. "And yet, when he died, he carried no envelope at all. Do you see, Hastings? Already, a piece of our puzzle has gone missing." Cecily hesitated. "There's something else. Tonight, before the music stopped, I saw Lady Blythe dancing again. Alone. But for a second, I thought there was someone beside her. I could have sworn I saw a shadow, as if someone moved in step behind her. And then the light flickered, and it was gone." Hastings looked skeptical, but Poirot's expression sharpened. "You saw a shadow, mademoiselle, and you thought it was a ghost. But shadows, they are most revealing, especially when the light comes from behind." Cecily's hands trembled. Do you think she's haunted, Monsieur Poirot?" He smiled gently, but his eyes remained grave. "But ghosts are often made of flesh and motive, not mist." When she had gone, Hastings muttered, "Dash it, Poirot. You don't mean someone's pretending to be a ghost?" "Pretending? Yes. But for whose benefit? That is the delicate question." He turned toward the tall windows overlooking the gardens. "Consider, Hastings, the lady dances alone because she must be seen dancing. She plays a part, but tonight, someone joined her. Unseen by all except a frightened secretary. Who would risk being seen in such a fashion?" Hastings shook his head. "You're suggesting an affair?" "I suggest nothing," said Poirot softly. "I only note that love and fear make excellent partners in the dance of crime." A sudden knock startled them both. Inspector Hewitt entered, carrying a small, sealed pouch. "Found this under the settee in the gallery," he said. "Thought you might want a look before I file it." Poirot took it delicately. Inside was a folded letter, slightly damp from spilled champagne. The handwriting was elegant but shaky. It read only, If truth be told, the widow's heart beats for the living, not the dead. Tonight it must end. Poirot's eyes glittered. Ah, voilà. A promise made and kept. Who wrote it? Asked Hastings. Poirot slipped the letter back into its pouch. That, my friend, is what we shall find out. But remember, only those who fear exposure make such poetic threats. And in Charnwood House, there are many who have something to hide. He glanced toward the dim corridor leading to Helena Blythe's chamber. Come, Hastings, the hour grows late. But the truth does not sleep, and neither, I suspect, does the widow. The corridor leading to Lady Blythe's chambers stretched long and silent, the air heavy with the faint scent of lilac and candle smoke. Poirot walked with his hands clasped neatly behind his back, his patent shoes clicking softly against the marble. Hastings followed a pace behind, glancing at the portraits that lined the walls, grim faces of ancestors who seemed to watch their passage with cold disapproval. Somewhere in the house, a clock struck midnight. The sound was distant, yet it seemed to tremble through the very floorboards. When they reached the end of the corridor, Poirot paused before a closed door. A faint light glowed beneath it. He knocked once, twice, and then gently pushed it open. Lady Blythe sat by the window, her profile framed against the silver-blue light of the moon. She did not turn as they entered. Her hand, still gloved, rested upon the arm of the chair, the other bare and pale as alabaster. "I thought you would come," she said quietly. Her voice had lost the tremor of earlier. It was calm now, distant, as though spoken by someone who had already crossed into another world. Poirot inclined his head. "Madame, I come because questions remain unanswered. And when the questions are many, the truth is near but hidden." She smiled faintly. "You think I killed Lionel?" "I think, madame," said Poirot softly, "that someone wished it to appear so." He stepped closer, the firelight flickering over his face. "Tell me this letter he carried, the one he intended for you. What did it contain?" Her eyes widened slightly. "You found it?" "None, not all. Only a fragment of it, a promise written in a trembling hand. It spoke of an ending, perhaps of love, perhaps of life." For a moment, the silence between them deepened until even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then she whispered, "Lionel loved me once, but he was not the man I loved." "Ah," murmured Poirot. "So there was another." Her gaze dropped to the fire. "Arthur's death left debts of the heart, not money. I tried to pay them with silence. But silence has a way of turning into a scream." Before Poirot could reply, the door burst open. Captain Allerton strode in, his face flushed, his voice taut. "Lady Blythe, you shouldn't be questioned at this hour." The woman's exhausted. His eyes cut sharply toward Poirot. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? Playing games while decent people suffer." Poirot regarded him coolly. "Mon capitaine, I play no games. But others are. They dance." Allerton stiffened. "You think I think," interrupted Poirot, "that you were seen leaving the West Gallery not long before Monsieur Carthorpe's death. You were angry. Why?" Allerton's jaw tightened. "Because he was a parasite. He'd been blackmailing Helena for months, threatening to expose her letters, private letters written after her husband died. He wanted money, and he wanted her reputation destroyed." Helena gasped. "Stop it! You've no right." But Poirot raised a hand. "No, madame. Let him speak. It is truth, even if it wounds." He turned to Allerton. "And you confronted him?" "Yes," said the captain. "I told him if he didn't leave her alone, I'd deal with him myself. But I didn't touch him. I swear it. When I left, he was alive." Poirot's expression did not change, but a spark flickered in his eyes. "And yet you wore gloves tonight, mon capitaine. Very fine. Of kid leather, yes? You removed them when you entered the ballroom, but where are they now?" Allerton's mouth opened, then closed. For a heartbeat, The room seemed to freeze. Helena rose suddenly, trembling. "Leave him be. You've no proof, none at all." Poirot bowed slightly. "You are correct, madame. I have no proof. Only patterns. And the patterns they whisper that every hand here has touched deceit, but only one has touched death." He turned, walking to the door. Hastings followed, casting a last glance at the widow, who had sunk back into her chair, staring into the flames as if searching for something lost. In the corridor, Hastings exhaled. "Good heavens, Poirot. She's protecting him. It's plain as daylight." Poirot smiled faintly. "Plain, yes. But light, my friend, can blind as easily as it reveals." He paused, listening. From somewhere deep within the house came a faint sound, the soft notes of a piano, hesitant and sad, playing the same waltz from earlier in the evening. Hastings frowned. "Who on earth?" Poirot's face darkened. "No one should be playing at this hour. Come, Hastings. I fear the house of Charnwood is not yet finished with its performance." They moved quickly down the corridor. The melody growing clearer, a mournful echo of joy turned cold. The drawing-room door stood slightly ajar. Poirot pushed it open. The piano lid was raised, the keys still trembling from recent touch. But no one sat at the bench. Only a single object lay there, gleaming in the half-light, a small key tied with a silver ribbon. Poirot picked it up, his eyes narrowing. "The music stops," he murmured. "And now, Hastings, the curtain begins to rise." Poirot held the key delicately between thumb and forefinger, the silver ribbon trembling slightly in the faint draught of the empty room. The piano's final notes still seemed to linger in the air, dissolving into silence. Hastings peered around, his eyes wide, scanning every corner, as if expecting someone to emerge from the shadows. "But there's no one here, Poirot," he said quietly. "Could have played it." Poirot did not answer immediately. He turned the key in his hand, studying its grooves, its small, ornate bow shaped like a heart. "You see, Hastings," he murmured, "the most telling objects are those that should not be found where they are. This key, look closely. It is too delicate for a door, too ornate for a cabinet. No, this is a key of sentiment, not function." Hastings frowned. "A jewelry box, perhaps?" "Just so," Poirot said softly. "Or something more private still." He placed the key in his pocket, then turned toward the window. Outside, the garden was bathed in moonlight. The rain had stopped, leaving the hedges glistening like dark mirrors. For a fleeting moment, Poirot thought he saw movement, a pale figure crossing the terrace, almost gliding. But when he blinked, it was gone. They left the drawing room and returned to the hall, where the remaining guests had gathered in uneasy clusters. The atmosphere was thick with dread and exhaustion. Inspector Hewitt stood near the staircase, speaking with two constables, his voice low and impatient. When he saw Poirot, he broke off mid-sentence. "Ah, there you are. We've finished with the servants' quarters. Nothing suspicious found." His tone carried a hint of defiance, as though daring Poirot to contradict him. "Indeed," said Poirot mildly. "And yet, mon cher inspecteur, you have not asked who played the piano at midnight." Hewitt blinked. "The piano? Don't be absurd. Everyone's accounted for." "Everyone," repeated Poirot, "except the one who wished to be unseen, the one who dances in the dark when the rest of the world sleeps." Hewitt's frown deepened, but Poirot moved past him, his gaze sweeping the staircase. Helena Blythe had reappeared at the landing, wrapped in a dark shawl. Her face was calm again, too calm. She descended slowly, her hand resting on the rail as though the act required effort. The guests watched in silence. "Inspector," she said, her voice composed but thin, "please, send everyone to bed. We are all tired, and nothing more can be done tonight." Poirot stepped forward, bowing slightly. "Forgive me, madame, but something more can always be done when truth still hides among us. Her eyes met his, weary but defiant. "And what truth do you seek now?" "The truth of a key," Poirot said, taking the small silver object from his pocket. "It was found upon the piano, where no one claims to have played. It belongs, perhaps, to something dear. To you?" Her face paled slightly. "It's mine," she admitted. "It opens a small music box. My husband gave it to me on our wedding day. I thought I'd lost it months ago." "Ah," Poirot breathed. "But you see, madame, it has returned to you tonight, delivered perhaps by unseen hands." She shivered, glancing toward the empty staircase. "You speak as if ghosts move through this house, Monsieur Poirot." He smiled faintly. "Ghosts? Yes, but living ones. Those who wear faces by day and masks by night." Before she could reply, a commotion erupted from the gallery. One of the constables came running, his boots echoing down the marble. "Inspector, there's been another break-in. The study door's been forced open." All turned at once. Hewitt cursed under his breath and hurried away, the others following close behind. Poirot and Hastings reached the study just as the inspector was throwing the door wide. The room was a mess. Papers scattered, drawers pulled out, the smell of cigar smoke hanging in the air. And there, near the hearth, something glimmered beneath the overturned chair, a torn scrap of parchment, half charred, half intact. Poirot stooped and retrieved it, smoothing the edges delicately. On it, faint but legible, were the words, "Account settled at last. Arthur's death was not as they said." A hush fell over the room. Hewitt muttered something about blackmail. But Poirot's eyes were bright and alert now, the little grey cells alive with motion. "Arthur Blythe," he whispered. "The husband, dead these 6 months. And yet, his shadow remains." How curious, Hastings, how very curious, that every secret tonight leads back to a man already buried. Helena Blythe appeared in the doorway, her face drawn, her breath quick. "What have you found?" Poirot held up the scrap. "Only a whisper, madame. But sometimes, a whisper is more dangerous than a shout." She looked as though she might speak, then faltered, pressing a hand to her throat. "Arthur. He died of heart failure. Everyone knows that." "Do they?" Poirot asked gently. "Or do they know only what they were told to believe?" Her silence was answer enough. Poirot's gaze drifted again toward the window, where the garden shimmered under the moonlight. "Someone," he murmured, "wants the past to stay buried. But the past, madame, has a most inconvenient habit. It digs itself up. And, as the clock struck 1, a gust of wind swept through the broken study door, scattering the ashes of the burned parchment across the floor like black snow. The ashes danced briefly in the cold draught before settling on the floor like tiny, black snowflakes. Poirot's gaze followed their delicate fall, his mind turning as silently as the clock ticking on the mantel. Hastings shifted uneasily beside him. "I say, Poirot, this is turning into quite the tangle. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? That, sir, Arthur's death wasn't natural at all?" Poirot's lips curved slightly. "You, mon ami, think in straight lines. But life and murder, they prefer curves. Still, yes, the evidence whispers what no one dares to say aloud. Sir Arthur Blythe may not have died by his heart, but by another's hand." Helena Blythe turned sharply at his words, her face drained of color. "That's absurd. My husband, he was ill for years. The doctors certified what they were told." Poirot interrupted gently. "And yet, madame, even the cleverest doctor cannot diagnose deceit. It hides beneath polite grief, beneath black veils and polite condolences." Her breath caught, her eyes glistening with something between fear and defiance. "You think I killed him? That I killed them both?" Poirot's tone softened. "Non, madame. I think you are caught between ghosts, one dead, one living. And ghosts are most dangerous when they wear familiar faces." The inspector cleared. his throat impatiently. "All this talk of ghosts and curves, what we need is hard evidence. The study was broken into, yes, but there's nothing stolen, and no footprints outside the window. We're chasing shadows." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Precisely, Inspector. Shadows are the footprints of truth. You cannot see who made them, but you can see where they fall." He glanced at the burnt parchment again, noting the ragged edge. Half a letter, half a truth. "We must find the rest." Helena's voice trembled. "You'll never find it. Arthur destroyed his letters before he died." "Ah," said Poirot softly, "but the dead are seldom as thorough as the living believe." He stepped closer to the writing desk, his gaze sweeping over the chaos. One drawer hung open, its lock splintered. Inside lay a small notebook, its pages filled with dense columns of numbers. Poirot flipped through, his finger pausing at an entry dated 6 months earlier. A single word leapt from the page. "Vane. Cecily Vane," murmured Poirot. "The secretary. She was with Monsieur Carthorpe tonight, yes? And he, the keeper of secrets, dies before midnight. A pattern. Hastings, see how it repeats? The women, the confidences, the betrayals." Hastings frowned. "But Cecily? She's timid as a mouse." Poirot gave a soft laugh. "A mouse, yes, but even a mouse will bite when cornered." At that moment, a distant thud echoed from upstairs, followed by a faint cry. Everyone froze. The sound came again, sharper this time, then silence. Poirot's head lifted. "From the east wing," he said quickly. "Come, Hastings." They hurried through the hall, the others trailing behind. The east corridor was dark, save for the faint flicker of candlelight seeping from beneath a door. Poirot pushed it open. Cecily Vane lay slumped beside her writing desk, one hand clutching the edge, the other pressed to her temple. On the floor near her feet was a heavy brass candlestick, its base slick with blood. "Good heavens," breathed Hastings. Poirot knelt beside her, feeling for a pulse. "Alive," he said quietly, "but only just. She has been struck and not by accident." He examined the wound, his expression tightening. Someone wished to silence her, but was interrupted. Helena appeared in the doorway, her eyes wide with horror. Who would do such a thing? Poirot looked up slowly. Someone who feared what she knew, someone who believed she held the missing truth. He rose, his gaze sweeping the room. A single envelope lay open on the desk, the wax seal broken. Inside, a few handwritten lines trembled under the candle's flame. Poirot lifted it carefully. "If I should not have the courage to speak, let this stand as my confession. The key to it all is hidden where Arthur's heart rests beneath the rose he planted for her." Poirot's voice was barely a whisper as he read the words. The key to it all. He turned to Hastings, eyes burning with sudden understanding. "Mon ami, tonight the dead speak very loudly indeed." "The rose," Hastings said blankly. "What rose?" "The one in the garden." Poirot murmured. "Planted by Sir Arthur himself before his death. Do you not recall, Hastings, how Lady Blythe said it was his favourite? The white rose by the fountain." They exchanged a glance. Poirot pocketed the letter and straightened his jacket. "Come, Hastings, we must disturb the earth tonight, before the murderer covers it again." As they stepped into the moonlit garden, the wind rose, carrying the faint scent of roses and decay. The fountain's surface rippled with reflected light, and beneath it, the earth gleamed dark and wet. Poirot bent down, his fingers tracing the damp soil. "Here," he whispered, "where love was buried, we shall find the truth." And as the moon slid behind the clouds, the garden seemed to hold its breath, waiting for revelation or ruin. The wind hissed softly through the hedges as Poirot and Hastings crossed the moonlit garden, their shadows wavering across the damp stones. The fountain whispered its hollow song, and the great white rosebush beside it gleamed ghost pale against the darkness. The air carried a chill, sharp with the scent of wet earth and something faintly metallic, something that did not belong to flowers. Poirot knelt, his gloved fingers pressing lightly into the soil, then drawing back, smeared with dark stains that glistened under the moon. "Blood," Hastings whispered. Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Not fresh, mon ami. No old, dried long before tonight. This ground has been disturbed before. Whoever buried something here did so with haste, not ceremony." He drew from his pocket the small silver key, its ribbon catching the moonlight. "And perhaps," he said softly, "this will open not just a lock, but a past carefully sealed." They dug with the constable's spade brought hurriedly from the house. The earth gave way easily, soft and damp. After only a few minutes, the metal edge struck wood. Poirot motioned Hastings to stop, then brushed away the soil himself with a handkerchief, revealing a small wooden box, its edges worn smooth with age. The clasp was rusted, but the heart-shaped key slid in perfectly. When the lid creaked open, a faint smell of old paper and faded perfume filled the air. Inside lay a bundle of letters bound with silk ribbon, and on top of them a small glass vial half filled with a dark residue. Hastings blinked. "What on earth?" Poirot lifted the vial delicately. "Hydrocyanic acid," he murmured. "Very quick, very quiet, and almost undetectable if administered cleverly. A poison for those who prefer their murders polite." "But then Arthur Blythe—" "Precisely," said Poirot. "His heart failure was not nature's work, but artifice." He turned the top letter over and read aloud, the first few lines, written in Sir Arthur's hand. "If anything should befall me, seek the truth in what Helena hides. For love and jealousy are the most potent poisons of all." For a moment, neither spoke. The fountain's gentle trickle seemed suddenly loud, like the breath of something waiting to be named. Hastings shivered. "You think she killed him? Her own husband?" Poirot's eyes gleamed, but his voice remained calm. "I think, Hastings, that love turns easily to hate when pride is wounded. But I also think we have yet to see the full composition of this melody." He rose, brushing the dirt from his trousers. "Come. We shall confront the widow, but gently. The truth must be coaxed from her lips like confession from a sinner." As they approached the terrace, a light flickered in the drawing-room window. Poirot halted abruptly. A shadow moved inside, slim, deliberate, crossing toward the study. He placed a hand on Hastings's arm. "Wait. Observe." The shadow paused by the desk, then stooped, lifting something from a drawer. Poirot strained his eyes. It was Helena Blythe herself, her pale face ghostly in the lamplight. She turned the object, a small framed photograph, over in her hands, then pressed it to her chest. A moment later, she set it down and pulled open another drawer, withdrawing an envelope the same handwriting as the half-burnt letter. She hesitated, then placed it into the fire. The flames leapt hungrily. Poirot's voice was quiet, almost reverent. "Ah, the instinct to destroy what condemns us, it is as human as the heartbeat." They entered quietly. Helena started as she saw them, her composure cracking for an instant. "Monsieur Poirot, you startled me." "Madame," he said softly, "forgive us. But it is difficult to startle a woman who already expects ghosts at her door." Her gaze flicked to the fire, where the last of the envelope turned to ash. "I don't know what you mean." "Madame, you know very well." Poirot drew the glass vial from his pocket, holding it up so that the light danced through its poisonous contents. "This was found in your husband's garden, buried beneath his rose, alongside letters of his own hand, letters accusing you." She went utterly still. For a heartbeat, no sound but the crackle of fire. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "He was cruel, Poirot. He made me a prisoner in that house, surrounded by his secrets, his suspicions. I never meant to harm him, I only wanted peace. And yet peace came at the cost of his breath," Poirot said gently. "Tell me, Madame, did you mix it yourself, or did someone persuade you?" She shook her head, eyes glistening. I can't speak his name. His, Poirot echoed softly. At that, a movement stirred beyond the doorway. A figure stepped into the room, Captain Allerton, his face hard, eyes blazing. Enough, Helena. Don't say another word. Poirot turned slowly toward him, his tone calm as a blade laid on silk. Ah, Monsieur le Capitaine, how gallant! But the truth, once woken, does not sleep again. Allerton's jaw tightened. You've no proof. Proof? Poirot murmured. Perhaps not yet, but soon, I think, the murderer will provide it himself. For a long moment, no one moved. The fire popped, casting shadows across their faces, and in that tense silence, Poirot's eyes flicked to the captain's gloves, fine kid leather, now faintly smudged with soil. The faint smudge on Captain Allerton's gloves caught the light like a whispered accusation. Poirot's gaze lingered on it for only a second before he turned away, his manner deceptively mild. You have been out, monsieur, he said softly, his tone almost conversational. The night air, it leaves its mark, does it not? Allerton's eyes flashed. I stepped outside for air. Yes, this house has become suffocating with your insinuations. Murmured Poirot. The guilty often find air difficult to breathe. Helena turned sharply, her voice trembling. Stop it. You have no right to talk to him that way. He's done nothing wrong. Poirot inclined his head, his expression unreadable. Madame, you are loyal, admirably so. But loyalty, when misplaced, becomes complicity. The poison that killed your husband was hidden with his letters that spoke of betrayal. And now, monsieur here wears the stain of that same earth upon his gloves. It is poetic, do you not think? Allerton's composure cracked for the briefest moment, then he straightened, his tone steady. You're twisting everything to suit your theory. Yes. I helped Helena bury those damned letters. Arthur used them to torment her, to remind her that she'd once cared for me. He delighted in her shame. She wanted them gone, so I did it. That's all. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And the vial? Allerton hesitated just long enough for the silence to grow heavy. I never saw it. None, said Poirot quietly. You never saw it because you placed it there yourself, long after Sir Arthur was in his grave. You wished to frame the woman you claimed to protect. But why? Because she hesitated to choose you after her husband's death. Because she feared your temper. Helena gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. That's not true, she cried. He would never. Poirot turned to her with a gentleness that belied the cold precision of his words. Madame, you have loved unwisely. It is not a crime. But it has blinded you. Captain Allerton is no protector. He is the hand that steers every shadow in this house. Allerton took a step forward, his face tightening. Enough of this melodrama, Poirot. You've no evidence. You've spun a fine story, but it ends here. The inspector, who had stood silently near the door, shifted uneasily. Poirot raised one hand. Not yet, mon ami. The story ends only when the final note is played. He moved closer to Allerton, his voice soft but relentless. Tell me, Captain, what did you do when you left the ballroom tonight? I went to the study, Allerton replied stiffly. I wanted to calm down after arguing with Carthorpe. Ah, yes, the argument. You threatened him, did you not? He was blackmailing Helena. I told him I'd expose him if he didn't stop. Poirot smiled faintly. So noble, so dramatic. But you forget one small detail. Monsieur Carthorpe was killed not in anger, but with cunning. His glass contained a trace of cyanide, the same poison used on Sir Arthur. The bottle was destroyed, but not completely. There were remnants, microscopic, beneath the rim of a cabinet drawer in the study. A drawer opened by someone wearing gloves, lest fingerprints betray him. Allerton's jaw clenched. You're bluffing. Perhaps, said Poirot softly. But you are sweating. The room seemed to shrink around them. Helena's breath came quick, uneven. The inspector took a cautious step forward, hand resting on his holster. Poirot, however, remained perfectly still, his voice calm, coaxing. You killed Sir Arthur to free the woman you loved, but she did not run into your arms as you expected. Instead, she drew away, afraid of the passion that had destroyed her husband. So you killed again the solicitor who had begun to suspect, who held the final proof, and tonight you tried to silence Mademoiselle Vane before she could confess what she had seen. A low sound escaped Helena's throat, half sob, half disbelief. No, he wouldn't. Allerton's voice broke through, strained and angry. You don't understand, Helena. I did it for you. Everything for you. He was a tyrant. He made you suffer. And Carthorpe, he would have ruined you. Poirot's gaze was unflinching. And yet, in saving her, you have destroyed her. Peace forever. Love that kills, monsieur, is no love at all. It is vanity, and you are its prisoner. Allerton's eyes darted wildly, searching for escape. But the inspector had moved closer, his hand firm on the man's shoulder. For a long moment, the room was filled only with the sound of the fire's crackle and the faint hum of the night wind pressing against the windows. Poirot turned away, his voice low. It is finished. The ghosts will dance no more. Helena collapsed into the nearest chair, her head in her hands. How could I not have seen it? She whispered. Poirot looked at her with quiet sorrow. Because, madame, the heart, unlike the mind, sees only what it wishes to believe. Outside, dawn began to stir beyond the horizon, the faintest light creeping into the long, dark house. And as Captain Allerton was led away, Poirot stood by the dying fire, the silver key glinting faintly in his hand, a small, cold emblem of the truths that lovers bury and detectives unearth. The dawn seeped through the tall windows like diluted wine, washing the grand hall of Charnwood House in a pale, ghostly light. The storm had passed, leaving the grounds glistening and quiet, as though the world itself held its breath after the violence of the night. Poirot stood near the fireplace, motionless but for the faint rise and fall of his chest, his gaze fixed upon the smouldering remnants of the fire. The silver key, cold and delicate, lay in his palm, a symbol of the secrets that had finally clawed their way to light. Hastings lingered nearby, his expression dazed, still trying to reconcile the events that had unfolded in such swift, terrible precision. I can hardly believe it, he murmured. Allerton. Of all people. He seemed so protective of her. Poirot turned his head slightly, the faintest flicker of sadness in his eyes. Yes, mon ami. But protection, when born of possession, becomes its opposite. He loved her as a man loves a jewel, something to be owned, admired, and locked away. When it slipped beyond his grasp, he destroyed it rather than let it shine for another. Hastings shook his head slowly. And she never saw it? Poirot's gaze drifted toward the staircase, where Helena Blythe had retreated hours before, the hem of her gown vanishing into darkness like a curtain closing on tragedy. She saw, but not with the eyes of reason. Love blinds the cleverest of minds, and guilt clouds the clearest of hearts. She believed herself cursed, haunted by her husband's ghost, when all along it was only a man who could not bear to be forgotten. The inspector entered then, his boots heavy on the marble floor. Allerton's confessed, he announced gruffly. Says he mixed the poison months ago, kept it in a flask in his quarters, used it first on Sir Arthur, then again tonight on the solicitor. Claims the second time was an accident that Carthorpe stumbled upon him, searching the study. He hesitated, glancing at Poirot. He broke down completely when we mentioned Lady Blythe. Begged to see her before he's taken to London. Poirot's brow furrowed, and for a moment he said nothing. Then, with quiet finality, he murmured, No, Inspector. There has been enough of confession. To see him again would serve no purpose but cruelty. The inspector nodded once and withdrew, leaving the air heavy with silence once more. Poirot's fingers turned the little key slowly, as if reluctant to let it go. Hastings watched him closely. "You've solved it, Poirot, yet you don't look satisfied. There's something still troubling you." Poirot gave a faint, weary smile. "Ah, you know me too well, mon ami. I am never content, while the smallest shadow remains unexplained. You recall the letter we found in Mademoiselle Vane's hand. The key to it all is hidden where Arthur's heart rests. We assumed it was a metaphor, the rose garden, the buried box. But, perhaps, Hastings, it was literal." Hastings blinked. "Literal? You mean?" Poirot's eyes gleamed suddenly, sharp as flint. "Sir Arthur's body was never exhumed, never examined properly. The death certificate was accepted without question, yes? And yet, the cause was poison, a subtle one, but one that leaves a trace. You think Allerton buried something with him?" Poirot nodded slowly. "Not someone's guilt. The poison flask, perhaps, or the missing half of that letter. It is a gesture symbolic of the murderer's vanity to hide proof within the very grave he himself created. But there is more. Allerton's confession was too complete, too convenient. He shields another. I think. There was one moment. Hastings, did you not notice? When he spoke of the poison, he said, 'We kept it,' then quickly corrected himself. The plural, it was not chance." Hastings's eyes widened. "You mean, she helped him?" Poirot's gaze hardened. "Perhaps not in the act, but in the intention. The words, the fears, the desperate wish for freedom, these things are crimes of the soul, not the hand." A movement on the staircase drew their attention. Helena Blythe stood there, pale as ivory, her eyes hollow yet strangely calm. "He's gone?" she asked. Poirot inclined his head. "Yes, madame. The man who loved too much, and not wisely, will trouble you no longer." She came down slowly, her hands clasped before her. "And yet," she whispered, "I feel no relief. Only emptiness." Her eyes lifted to Poirot's face, searching. "Did you ever love Monsieur Poirot?" He regarded her for a long, still moment. "I loved order, madame. And truth. They do not betray." She gave a faint, sorrowful smile, then turned toward the tall window, where the pale light of morning revealed the first blush of dawn upon the garden. "Perhaps," she said softly, "but truth does not comfort either." Poirot followed her gaze, and for a moment the silence between them was almost tender. Then he stepped forward, his voice quiet but firm. "Madame, truth may not comfort, but it cleanses. And when the earth is cleansed, flowers grow again, even roses." She looked back at him, tears trembling at the edge of her lashes. "Then let them grow," she said. "For that is all that's left." Poirot inclined his head, and as she turned away, he slipped the little silver key into his pocket. The faintest smile touched his lips, not of triumph, but of melancholy acceptance. "Yes," he murmured to himself, "the ghosts have danced their final waltz, but it is always the living who must pay the tune." Outside, the sun broke through the clouds at last, striking the white rose by the fountain. Its petals gleamed wet with dew, or perhaps, Poirot thought, with tears the dawn had kindly refused to name. The morning light had turned air sharp and clear, scattering away the last of the storm clouds. Charnwood House stood in uneasy silence, its windows reflecting a day that promised no peace. Poirot remained in the drawing room long after the others had withdrawn, a small porcelain cup untouched beside him. The scent of smoke and roses lingered faintly in the air, a mingling of memory and ruin. Hastings entered quietly, his usual briskness subdued by exhaustion. "You haven't slept," he said softly. Poirot smiled without looking up. "Ah, but I have thought, mon ami, and for me, that is better than sleep. It is the exercise of the little grey cells that restores the balance." Hastings took a chair opposite him, studying his friend's expression. You're still thinking about her, aren't you? Lady Blythe. Poirot's eyes drifted toward the garden beyond the window. A woman who has lost everything, husband, lover, and peace of mind. And yet, I wonder if she ever truly had them. Hastings. Even truth cannot bring happiness where guilt has already built its home. Before Hastings could reply, the door opened and Inspector Hewitt appeared, hat in hand. "We're taking Allerton to London within the hour," he said. "He's calm now, too calm if you ask me. Keeps muttering that it was all for her. Thought you'd want to know." Poirot nodded, his voice grave. "Yes, he is a man who has accepted his fate, but not his responsibility. That distinction, my dear Inspector, is one the law does not always understand." Hewitt frowned. "You mean you think he's lying about something still?" Poirot rose, walking slowly toward the mantel. "I think he tells a truth so carefully trimmed that it hides a lie at its heart. You see, he confessed to killing Sir Arthur. Yes, but he described the scene with the precision of one who watched it, not performed it. There was no hesitation in his account, no tremor of guilt, only pride." Hastings blinked. "You mean he wasn't the one who poisoned Sir Arthur?" "None," Poirot said softly. "I believe it was she." Hewitt stiffened. "Lady Blythe? But there's nothing to tie her directly." "There is," interrupted Poirot gently. "The key, the letters, the words of confession that she herself wrote. She may not have poured the poison, but she ordered it, planned it, and gave Allerton the courage to do what she could not. That, Hastings, is the cruelest form of manipulation, one born not of malice, but despair." He turned toward them, his face somber. "Allerton's love was violent, yes, but hers was cold, calculating. When she realized the burden of his devotion, she recoiled, and then, to silence him, she did nothing as his guilt grew heavy enough to crush him." Hastings looked aghast. "But she suffered enough already." Poirot's eyes gleamed sadly. "Suffering is not always punishment, mon ami. Sometimes it is only justice delayed." Inspector rubbed his chin. "If you think she's guilty, we can still—" Poirot raised a hand. No, Inspector. There is no need. Her punishment is beyond anything you could impose. To live with the knowledge that the man who killed for her now dies for her, that is a life sentence with no appeal." Hewitt exhaled heavily and left the room. When the door closed, the quiet returned, broken only by the faint ticking of the clock. Poirot crossed to the window and looked out once more. Helena Blythe stood in the garden, still in her dark gown, a solitary figure beside the fountain where the white rose gleamed in the sunlight. "She has gone to say goodbye," Poirot murmured. "Do you think she'll ever find peace?" Hastings asked. Poirot was silent a long time before he answered. "Peace, Hastings, is for those who can forget. She will remember." They watched as Helena knelt by the rosebush, her fingers brushing the petals as though in farewell. Then she rose and turned toward the house, her movements slow, almost dreamlike. When she entered the room, her eyes met Poirot's, and for the first time, there was no fear, only resignation. "I heard," she said quietly. "They're taking him away." "Yes, madam." Poirot's voice was gentle. He confessed. She smiled faintly, though her lips trembled. "Of course he did. He always said he would protect me." She paused, her gaze drifting toward the window. "But I did not protect him. Does that make me cruel, Monsieur Poirot?" Poirot shook his head slowly. "It makes you human, madame. We are all cruel, in ways we do not see until it is too late." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "If I told you that I knew what he planned, that I didn't stop him, would that make me guilty?" "Only of silence," Poirot said softly. "And silence, too, kills." Her eyes glistened. "Then perhaps it is just, perhaps the world must have its ghosts." took the silver key from her pocket and placed it on the mantel beside him. "You should keep it, Monsieur Poirot. You understand it better than I." Poirot regarded the little key, then her. "Non, madame. It belongs to you. It opens not a box, but the truth, and that you must carry always." She gave a small, weary nod, then turned and walked away. Her footsteps echoed down the corridor, fading into stillness. Poirot remained standing there, the firelight catching on the key until it seemed to pulse like a living thing. Hastings finally spoke. "Do you think she'll ever speak the full truth?" Poirot smiled faintly. "No, mon ami. The truth, once spoken aloud, loses its mystery. She will keep it locked inside, where it can torment her properly." They stood in silence for a long while. Outside, the day had turned brighter, and the sound of carriage wheels crunched faintly on the gravel drive as Allerton was taken away. Somewhere in the distance, a bird began to sing a strange, melancholy note that felt out of place amid the lingering heaviness of the house. Poirot adjusted his tie and took his hat from the stand. "Come, Hastings. It is time to go. The case is finished, though the story, that will linger. The English countryside loves its tragedies. Soon they will whisper of the widow who danced alone, and every lonely heart will feel her step across their dreams." Hastings followed him out into the cool morning air. The carriage waited at the gate, the driver half asleep, his cap pulled low. As they walked, Hastings said quietly, "You always see deeper than anyone else, Poirot. But sometimes I wonder, doesn't it weary you, knowing how ugly the heart can be?" Poirot smiled, though his eyes were tired. "Non, my friend. It saddens me. Yes, but it does not weary me, for where there is ugliness, there is also beauty. The beauty of truth, of justice, of order restored. It is enough." He paused before stepping into the carriage and looked back once at Charnwood House. The windows glimmered like watchful eyes, reflecting the pale sun. In the garden, the white rose stirred gently in the breeze, its petals falling one by one upon the dark soil where secrets slept. Poirot lifted his hat slightly, as though in salute, then climbed in beside Hastings. As the carriage rolled away, the house grew smaller behind them, its walls swallowing the last echoes of the night. Poirot closed his eyes briefly, letting the rhythm of the wheels soothe his thoughts. "You see, Hastings," he said softly, "the ghosts of the past never truly vanish. They merely wait quietly, patiently, until someone listens." And as they disappeared down the winding lane, the sound of the fountain faded into silence, leaving only the whisper of the wind through the roses, where love, guilt, and memory would forever entwine like dancers circling endlessly beneath the watchful eyes of the dead.